Hello and welcome again. We are studying the welding technologies in the fourth section, fourth unit of WT subject of BTech second year common to all branches. In the last lecture of welding, we discussed about the introduction and the basic elements of the welding, what is welding, how it's done, and what are the basic features. So today, moving on from the last lecture, we will be talking more about welding technologies. So as we discussed yesterday, that welding is done either by application of pressure or by applying extra metal or filler metal, that is called filler metal. So filler metal is used where we don't put any pressure on the work pieces to be welded together. And we also discussed about we started the welding, and we also discussed about the elements of welding, what are the elements of the welding. So in that elements we talked, when we started welding, we discussed that there are two modules or techniques. Either we use pressure or we use filler metal. If we are not using any pressure, then we must have to use filler metal. Only then two pieces can be joined together. So first thing is in welding that first element is we need heat to fuse two metals together. So first of all, we need heat, then we need pressure. If not pressure, then we need filler metal, extra metal that is to be provided to fuse the two metals. So this is the basic requirement of welding. So filler metals are used to fill the space between the welded joints. Filler metal is melted and added to the joint during the welding process. Of course, the joining is at the fusion level and at the elemental level. So the filler metal or the additional metal that is to be filled is uh, also fused, so that this fused metal keeps the other two metals together and fuse together. And at the same time, filler metal also adds strength to the joint. So this is the role of filler metal. This is used to fill the space, and then filler metal is also used to add the strength to the joint. Extra metal is provided, and this extra metal keeps the two parent metals together fused, and this is the way it provides strength to the joint. So this is the role of filler metal. Then fluxes. What are the fluxes? Fluxes are also used as a cleaning agent to avoid the contamination of welding joint by impurities like oxides. Because we have not discussed the role of oxygen in welding. I would like to discuss it right now. It's very important role that oxygen plays. When the metal are fused, then the metals are melted, slightly melted, and edges of them are melted. It's not melting like we have earlier done in case of casting, but in welding, we slightly melt, we slightly uh, give heat above melting temperature to the edges of the pieces that we are joining together. So in that case, the metal is slightly melted, and molten metal is highly exposed to the oxygen of the environment, and it is very much affiliated and very much fond of associating with oxygens and forming metal dioxide. So the main problem with the welding is that when we melt the metal, we have to keep the metal intact from the oxygen of the environment. And if it gets slight exposure to the environment, it combines with oxygen of the metal and oxygen of the environment and forms M2O, metal dioxides. So we have to be very careful while welding that we don't have to give any chance to the molten metal to come in contact with the oxygen of the environment and thus forming metal dioxide. This metal dioxide not only harms the strength, but also same time it also changes the structure, and a very weak joint is made when oxygen is combined with metal dioxide. So we have to protect the molten metal from the environment, and we will study. There are many techniques we will get to know in future in further classes, that there are many techniques that we have, that we hold the molten metal apart or isolated from the environment, so that metal is not able to come in contact with the oxide, because oxygen is ready to form oxide with the molten metal. So this is very important aspect that we have to take care of the all welding technologies. So we use flux also. Flux are the materials that are used uh, to stop the molten metal to come in contact with the environmental oxygen. So fluxes are the materials that stop stop all types of impurities, that also clean the molten metal from inclusions and other impurities, and at the same time they form an envelope, a gaseous envelope around the joint, so that the molten metal does not come in contact with the oxygen of the environment. Thus, fluxes are the cleaning agents that basically used to clean the molten metal, as well as they are protective to the parent metal and molten metal, so that oxides are not performed. Flux dissolve oxide, trapped gases, and slag from base metal. And not only flux provide the environment, not only flux provide the envelope or keep the parent metal intact, at the same time they also take away any dissolved oxygen that comes in with that forms oxide, metal oxide. They also flux also dissolve or absorb oxides. Either they take themselves the oxide, or they break the oxide, and then other trapped gases and other impurities from the base metal. Flux are used as a cleaning agent, as a productive agent, and at the same time they are the elements that take away oxides. Either they take away oxides, or they break oxides and other trapped gases in welding, and other impurities, carbon and other dust, other impurities, foreign metals. So fluxes are the cleaning agents, basically having two uses. Now, what is weld pool? Weld pool is the area where the molten metal is formed. The weld pool is basically a small workable portion of a weld, is a small pool where the molten metal where the molten metal is fused together to form a joint. So weld pool we'll discuss later on. Weld pool is the central to the success of welding process. Weld pool solidifies to become weld bead. So weld pool is basically the fusion zone of two metals, where after its solidification it becomes weld joint and weld bead. So this is weld pool. The role of weld pool is very important. As we have seen, it not only fuses together the molten metal, but at the same time it provides strength. It's joins the weld, it's joined the two metals fuse together, and then also it provides strength. So all the success of welding lies on the type, nature, and depth of the weld pool. This is the welding process categories. How welding process are categorized. First, as we discussed, that either we have to apply pressure, or if no pressure, then we have to add a filler metal. So how this is categorized? We can say this is plastic or pressure, under pressure without addition of filler metal. So if we categorize the welding process into straight two categories, one is plastic or pressure welding, other is fusion or filler metal welding, fusion or extra material welding. So in plastic or pressure welding, without addition of filler metal. So plastic welding is done by not supporting, by not applying any it's not any extra metal, whereas pressure is only applied. Only pressure is applied. That's why it's called plastic welding. Whereas in case of fusion, only filler metal is applied, and they are let together fuse, and no extra pressure is applied. And under natural pressure, under gravitational pressure, the parent metals are fused together with the help of an external material that is called filler material. So we are having different types of heats if we see in plastic or pressure welding, and in the fusion welding we are types of heat that are required. So when pressure is required or plastic welding is done, when pressure is required, we need later we need lesser heat. We need lesser heat as compared to fusion welding, because in fusion welding there is no pressure, so high heat is required. We have also seen in the case of casting that in casting there is no pressure required. That's why heat is very much important, and heat is very high, and as high as above melting temperature, and pressure is not applied there. But in case of hot and cold working processes or forming processes, we have seen that pressure is required, pressure is applied. So when the pressure is required or pressure is applied, lesser heat is required.